This is Ed. I'm in San Diego. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody out there in TV land. With us today is Dr. Ken Lloyd. Wave. Hello.
Hello.
In a crew neck sweater. That's great. Looking very preppy. Yeah. And
Trying to
Christian
define my generation.
is wearing a Star Latin shirt. Looks like stars. What's that design?
Little
Little
squares.
squares. Okay. And Natalie, welcome again.
Hi.
And Israel, once again. This is your, what's the third time now, right?
Second.
Oh, second. Oh,
Yeah,
Second for
sorry for all
Israel,
the.
fifth for Natalie.
Oh, wow.
yeah. Good. It's good to keep count, Christian. Thank you.
53rd for me, I think.
53rd. Wow. Now I forget what number. I should look more often. I think this will be broadcast number, well, I should say production number, and I'll explain that in a minute. I think it's 90, no, not 90.
900.
900 and something. Geez, I'm getting lost in my own head. It's approaching 960, but well, maybe it's a little bit more than that now. I thought originally when this past Labor Day, when I started to make a plan for a burst towards Christmas, that I'd hit 1,000, but it's too much,
Yeah.
It's not a lot of work doing this, sitting here and talking, but the prep and the organizing, and that's where the best practice has become. It is you get up in the middle of the night wondering, do I have this right? Do I doing this correct? And there's only so much of that I could take.
Yeah. It's
All right,
Rico. Hi,
hey
Rico.
Rigo.
Hey Ed, how are you?
Hola.
Hola, hola.
Okay, we got everybody in now. Let's see, everybody's here. Okay, there might be a couple of new people, but we're going to begin. We are recording on this global TV talk show. Rigo is in Mexico City. Ken Lloyd is in San Fernando Valley, LA. And everybody else on the screen is in Orange County, California. Here we are leading the way. So, Rigo, what are you going to do to celebrate Christmas? Staying local? You got family coming?
We are visiting family. Yeah, perhaps 1 week with the family and then go back home. But we are staying mainly here in the surroundings. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So Joanne and I are going up to Rancho Santa Margarita, which is in South Orange County, to family reunion in my son-in-law's house. It's got a big house, so it fits everybody. And it coincides with Tim's birthday. So he's a millennial. So it'll be interesting. And here in San Diego today, the skies are clear, a little chilly, but bright sun. It's terrific. In fact, I have to put up the umbrella on the deck. I live in a condo in downtown Seaport Village, and the sun at this time of year blasts right into the living room here. And inside the living room, it could be 80 degrees, and you go outside and it's 62. And so by putting up the umbrella on the deck, it deflects the sun away. Yeah. Anyway, that's my shtick. So the chart behind and the chart link that was sent out is the theme of this discussion, but we certainly don't have to stick to it. I just wanted to, present it, and people can look at it later, of course, in the broadcast. And if you need me to send the exact thing again, I'll be glad to do that. I am sent by a variety of, we'll call them coaches and thought leaders in very specific fields of study. People development, human resources, of course, is the wellspring of everything that I'm doing these days. But training and development and coaching and leadership. And Stephen Howard is perfect example of that, and Humany, and all the acclaim and talk that is around what he's doing now. And this chart, and if you look at the link that I sent out, on the bottom part of that link is an explanation of what all this means, according to the professor who did it. And it's very meaningful. And it talks about everybody's different, how I look at things. And I happen to be 79 and a half years old these days. As of yesterday, that's my birthday's in June. The big 8 is coming. Well, never even imagined being active at this age, but here I am. So had a recent physical, passed with flying colors. Bone structure is, according to them so far, knock on wood, that
Excellent.
of a 25-year-old. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and good blood pressure and all systems go. No sign of any cancers anywhere yet. So that's cool.
Congratulations. And you're
So
a
I
role
just keep
model.
going, So, I have vodka every night, so that helps me sleep. And I have orange juice and coffee in the morning. That helps me get going. And then Joanne and I go out for lunch and a walk on Shelter Island or Harbor Island or Coronado Beach. One of those. We circulate around, and we just keep going. So a very long time ago, during the Vietnam era, I wasn't drafted, but I was high pick. So I joined the Army in the reserves in Boston, where I'm from. And I joined the medical. I was fortunate to get into a medical unit, and not just medic, but thoracic surgical operating room unit. And it was led by guys my age, because everybody was running scared or running into the war, or running scared away from it. And so these guys were from Harvard Medical School, top class, top in the class surgeons. And the thoracic is this thing right through here, In other words, gunshot wounds or, injuries from guys at war. Never mind at schools these days, right? So how to deal with those injuries is what the medical unit was into. I'll be real brief here. And so I was trained, I knew nothing about that, but I was trained by these doctors. They took me under their wing. We're all about the same age, but they were really smart and skilled. And they taught me how to be a nurse. Not a medical, no, I didn't do medical procedures, but I prepared sterile tray. I knew how to bandage a wound. I knew how to calm or try to calm somebody who's screaming in pain or worried. And that experience changed my life, actually. We did not get called up to go to Vietnam throughout. And the reason for that is really interesting, and I'll be real brief here. Is the high proficiency, the technical skills that the surgeons were developing under the approval of the commanding general of the medical services within the Army Reserve. He was a surgeon. The Harvard guys, Harvard Medical School, were residences in Massachusetts General Hospital. And the commanding general was the chief surgeon in the Mass General Hospital. So they had approval from whoever was president at that time, I think it was Nixon, to be the training unit for all the MASH units in Vietnam. So they set up, they actually had TV camera, almost like Zoom, but it wasn't Zoom. They had TV cameras in operating rooms and about how to do certain procedures. They packaged those up and sent them off to Vietnam for all the doctors. And so it was kind of a special unit. I had no idea that I'd be doing Zoom videos and talking about it back then, but here I am, it's a straight line from there to here. It wasn't all good, but here we are today doing good. And I thank you guys and Natalie for doing this. And it's not for me, it's for the audience out there who will see this in coming weeks and months, maybe even years. You'll all get a copy of this program as you have in the others, with the others, and feel free to redistribute it. So Christian, generations, when I'm going to ask you to talk about your experience in the mobility business, managing a team remotely, and prior to that as well, in person. What's the secret to managing so many different generations?
Well, it helps if you have a rough idea of the chart behind you, at least some of the traits. That definitely helps. You kind of have to teach yourself that and keep thinking about it until until it becomes second nature in a way. But then I would say the other half is that you also do exactly the opposite. You treat people the same way, with the same level of empathy, with the same level of interest and curiosity. And just, it's a little bit like what you just did, Ed. You shared a story from your own youth, and people who have led a relatively long life, that's what you want to hear from them. You want to learn what it was like back then, and vice versa, because I'm Gen X. People who are younger, who are millennials, or maybe even Gen Z, they have a very different life experience in many ways from me. And you want to hear from them as well about what their assessments are. And it could be a professional situation. It could also be a life situation. One of my former coworkers, for instance, just purchased her first home. And it was very interesting to see her going through this, right? I purchased my first home over 20 years ago. So and we've always talked about home sales. So there's this professional component to it, but now she's doing it herself. And we talked at length about her experiences and her feelings about it and how exciting it was. So I would say that that would be one of my two secrets to doing it, to managing it. Same level of empathy and interest on the one hand, but then also to keep in mind what's this grid being a very gross oversimplification. What's important to people based on this grid? What are the tendencies?
Fascinating.
Yes.
Dr. Ken Lloyd, I have to go to you. We're contemporaries of sorts, but you had a very different journey than me. Why don't you, before I get into that, it's tomorrow, I think, right? We're doing this, your book. Yeah. And rather than just a talk show, I've renamed the series where we're doing books called Book Report. Remember those days? When we had to read a book and then do a book report, stand up in class. God, I hated that.
I don't think anyone liked it.
Jesus, I hate that. But you know what? I think I told the story when I was younger. I had conflicts, mental conflicts, and I don't know the real reason for it, but I had them. And I stuttered and so insecure. I couldn't really read until this football coach took me aside and got me to shape up really, take control of my head. And he said, you got to read something that you like. Don't read stuff you don't want to read. Just read something that you like and learn how to read and understand the power of reading. and enjoy it. So he said, what do you want to read? So sports pages, books about baseball and Ted Williams, and I did that. And I stood up and did a quick book report about some book that I read about Ted Williams, baseball player, the Boston Red Sox, home run hitter, who happened to be from San Diego at the time, but I didn't even know where San Diego was. So being in Boston. So, and I remember it was fourth grade and I got an applause from everybody that was making fun of me because I was stuttering. But then I got that. Boy, what a plus that was at the time. Dr. Kent, I don't need the psychoanalysis on right now, but please comment on that and talk about something from your pens.
Well, sure. I just want to say I totally agree with Christian's point. I think there is mutual learning across the generations in order to really have success, where we want to learn as much as we can from generations that preceded us, as well as the newer generations that have come in, and truly listen, because they can learn from us and we can learn from them. We don't have all the answers, nor do they. But you look at some of the new themes and trends that are so important to today's generation, certainly to Gen Z, and as we move forward, in terms of inclusion, in terms of collaboration, in terms of fairness, in terms of mental health, work-life balance, all those factors, very different from when, certainly, Ed, when you and I entered the workforce. You go there, it's one more structured. There's no such thing as hybrid. You come to work at this hour, you do this, you do your job. Very different. Now there's more focus on career development, but that happens, it should happen for literally at every age and at every generation. I remember learning so much from my grandmother, who was born in San Francisco in 1887. And I remember flying to New Orleans with her, and she said, "Isn't this a miracle? When I was a little girl, we would take a horse and buggy." And to think of the changes and thinking, wow, how different will that be? My dad told me that at the turn of the century, there was talk about closing basically the patent office because everything that was going to be invented was pretty much invented. Imagine that type of thinking. And so we now look as we project forward, and I think we have to stay away from stereotypes about the generations as they should about us. Yeah, there are boomers that might not be as connected as some of today's newer generations are, but at the same time, they're young people who don't follow along with the stereotypes of Gen Z or Gen Y. I was just literally yesterday talking with an individual who was saying that these Gen Z employees, I just don't know if I want to hire anymore. Good luck with that. They come to work, they leave, they don't want to stay, they go to lunch, they don't even tell me that they're leaving. Well, wait a minute here. Number one, that's a stereotype. Number two, if that's really going on, talk to them. Let's communicate on this. So I think there's just so much to be learned. I think the only thing I don't like to hear is if I say something that I think is funny and someone says, "Oh, boomer joke." Oh no. It hurts. Okay, but it probably is one. So all right, it's mutual learning. I think is so important.
What's funny and what's not, right?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, when they say that to me about my age, I say, "What do you mean? I'm technologically savvy. I know how to use the Google." Okay, boomer joke, dad joke. It's okay.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I want to hear from Natalie.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to make a comment like that, similar to this, but I mean, also, if we're looking at things in perspective, especially historically, how, we're looking at how the boomers are seeing Gen Z, but what about the people at the turn of the century? How did they see the boomers, right? And there's going to be a large generation divide when people grow up and there are new changes in the world and people have new perspectives as they're being born into a changing world, and that's going to happen regardless. Is Gen Z really so problematic and so difficult, or is this just a new type of perspective on the world that the boomers aren't necessarily used to, or previous generations aren't used to? But I feel like if we were to go back in time and ask you know, someone from the turn of the century who's trying to raise their kid who's growing up and becoming different, they might have similar complaints about the way that they see their kid and their generation. So I think complaining about how the new generation is so different and so out of left field, I mean, I don't know if that's really a today problem or if that's always been a problem, but today we talk about it because it's happening today. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, how
Absolutely.
about 2 cents from Mexico City? Rigo.
That sounds far away.
So tell
Um,
us, yeah, so tell us a Mexico City story.
well, you know, I have been in because generations depends a lot on the company culture, meaning that personally I have been in hierarchical companies and or horizontal companies, flat companies. So that makes a huge change where, for example, in Mexico, the old days they used to call the senior people that you are major in economics, you are major in accounting, some kind of respect. And but when you work for let's say flat companies, then you just called by your name. And for me, I have been living both experiences, feeling uncomfortable in both ways, because but this is the way you learn how to deal with people. And at the end, I mean, my personal conclusion is just about adapting for the company, you know, for the company you are working for. But I don't know if there is good or wrong. It's just about yeah, adapting to the new circumstances. And I think what could be like more interesting is like maybe collaborating in an environment where there are multicultural profiles and also multicultural generations. That's gonna be certainly interesting. But I have had also the opportunity to work in those kind of environments, and it's very enriching. Just the fact that everybody connects in a single point, and then no matter what your age is, perhaps this is the panel right now. Everybody, you know, talk about one single thing, and this is very, you know, inspiring for keep developing our habits, our mindset.
Interesting, all about collaboration.
Exactly.
Fascinating. Yeah. Israel, what do you think of collaboration, or are you in isolation a lot?
Personally, because I come from like a very intergenerationally mixed family, collaboration has kind of been ingrained in me from day one. I'm not opposed to working under specific conditions. At the same time too, though, I will also like set like here's how I would like to operate, and collaboration, compromise. I very much am a big fan of compromising, especially in regards to like intergenerational communication. I do think it is important to, sort of how Ken said, to stay away from like these generational stereotypes from each other, because these stereotypes sort of create a caste of sorts within companies, business, and even just general life. If you just constantly sort yourself, you get very tribalistic of sorts. And so I do think intergenerational communication, compromise, and just sort of collaboration is very important, very, very important, especially when it comes to, creating a functioning environment.
And you have multicultural, and you have a multicultural environment in addition to what you just said too.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. Multiculturalism is quite a statement, especially with how much, how do I say, interacting with people I do. Like for instance, I actually have a friend who's currently in Mexico City right now visiting family. Um, as well as sort of, my willingness to participate with people of different cultures and understand them better. I was telling Christian earlier, I was like, during finals, I had Vietnamese coffee, Ethiopian espresso, and a burrito all in my system, and it was like very multicultural.
Well, that's funny. So let me ask you a question, Israel, about collaborating in a workplace environment, if you can imagine that and think of that for a minute. Um, So a lot of people say my age need help with tech, and you've been living it all your life. So have you been asked within that kind of a workplace, and quote unquote workplace, it couldn't be anywhere, it could be in a school lunchroom, but or in a workplace environment where there's different people, different ages. Have you been asked to help somebody older to know about tech, have a
Uh,
tech issue?
Yeah, I would say on a few occasions I have been asked like a couple times, though this is rather kind of ironic because this is a habit I adopted from again in intergenerational space. I'm rather not too tech savvy. I'm a bit clunky with it actually, if anything. But I like to joke around saying I'm a bit of a Luddite. I'm sometimes a bit opposed to technology because of just how complicated it can get. But at the same time too, like I have proven proficient enough, well, when asked questions, proven proficient enough, in teaching someone the basics of how to handle a computer or, technology to in any degree. It's just one of those things of despite my clunkiness in comparison to my peers, I'm still, I would say, relatively fluent in regards to giving assistance, especially in regards to technology.
Okay,
Um,
Christian. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say, so I'm in an interesting spot as well with this discussion because I have a lot I volunteer at historic organizations, nonprofit organizations within the city that I live in. So I have a lot of I suppose like nonprofit colleagues, volunteer colleagues that are of the older generations. And so I've seen actually, I mean, I know there's the stereotype that like boomers or silent generation folks don't know how to use technology and they're so bad at using technology. I would argue that it is, as with most stereotypes, it's a lot more complicated than that and not always the case. There are some, I'm not particularly tech savvy either. I would say I'm probably, I'm proficient. I've grown up with technology. I know how to work things, but I'm not the best at figuring out all the intricate details of how to set up a printer without a manual. So when I go into my volunteer organizations and we are discussing things that have to do with technology, there are some boomers who have no clue even how to turn off their iPhone settings. But there are some people who are very proficient in it. And they totally, they know more than I do on how exactly to get everything done and what exactly to do to get this new system running. And I couldn't even do that. And I've seen also it's tremendously interesting when you start to try to compare because it doesn't really work. With my grandma, for example, I have to explain to her where the search bar is. But when I talk to my grandpa and I try to explain, okay, this is how you Google something, he's like, what are you talking about? I know how to Google something. I just want to know what website you're talking about. And I was like, oh, my bad, right? I made a judgment there that clearly was not the correct judgment. So, I think that with most stereotypes, it's somewhat incorrect. And boomers deserve more credit because some boomers do know more about how to use technology than I do.
And we're
Well,
making an
very well
assumption.
said. Yeah,
We're
excuse
making
me.
an assumption here as well, which is that technology is current technology. So, for instance, Natalie, you can tell them about the gramophone. You
Yes.
had to learn how to use a gramophone
I did have to learn how to use a gramophone. That was
with a
very
wax
interesting.
cylinder.
Yeah. I knew nothing about that. But all of the boomers who I volunteered with knew exactly what to do, exactly how to get the wax cylinder onto the gramophone without making any mistakes, and exactly how to perfectly preserve it since we were dealing with an artifact. And I was shocked. I was like, this is amazing and wonderful. And, this technology is like a century and like what 130 40 years old or something like that. So definitely I think also technology is relative. I mean, technically, we could be talking about technology today, which maybe one generation might be more proficient with, but then the technology of the past, another generation's going to be more proficient with. I can tell you, people my age do not know how to use a fax machine. I don't think they know what a fax machine is. So definitely.
At the same time, I think we all need to buckle our seatbelts as AI comes in full force. It's coming in at an exponential rate. It's going to have profound influences on all aspects of life. And so this next generation is going to grow up with it. And it's going to be clearly compelling for all of us to get on board with that and recognize the power, the influence, the dangers, the risks, and get a real understanding of what is happening now and where it's going. It's going to be an AI generation of those that are really born into it as AI becomes more and more intelligent and literally learns as they're talking about now to be making decisions. We know right now at current time, it's not perfect. And we know there's AI hallucinations, there's some stereotypes within AI, there can be errors, it can make up stuff, but it is happening so fast. You just look at what these major companies are already doing with it. That's going to have a huge generational impact. That's going to impact all of us in terms of our understanding and use and knowledge of AI, because the next generations are going to look back at us, God willing, we'll all be here, and say, don't you know about X? And the kinds of things that we're doing and analyzing and thinking about be totally foreign to them. Why do you do that? In the same way that I'm thinking of, I grew up with a typewriter. In high school, we all had to take typing. My counselor said, I can't read your handwriting. You got to take typing. Went into the typing class, 2 males, all the rest were females, 40 of them, all learning basically to be secretaries. And we had this old Royal typewriter that we had at each of our desks, no letters on it. The letters are all up on the board. And we're looking at now to talk about even typing. And then the big deal was to go to electric typewriters. Wow, that's technology. Then it's so far beyond that now where you can just say it and it appears on the screen, just a totally different world. And push forward to AI and its impact across the board in every field and profession. It's gonna be a very different world. And a new generation's gonna grow up with it and have it be totally second nature to them. So we all have to buckle up for that and be ready.
I'd
I
like
want
to
to
hear
turn.
from,
Oh,
sorry.
please go right ahead.
I would like to hear from Rico, because Rico, I think you're a millennial. So you have got the millennial Gen
Yeah.
Alpha relationship going in your family, right? You have, how old is your son?
Yeah, my son is 7 years old. He's gonna,
Yeah.
yeah.
Gen Alpha, growing up with AI.
I know he basically believes in that every screen needs to be touch, and then he shocks when he realizes that there is buttons and things like that. But I think I try to empathize with him, but I try to avoid, at least, not perhaps I'm not the best instructor, but at least I try to avoid not to teach the same biases that I learned from my parents, and then let him discover by himself what it looks like the world currently without my own influence. So he gets his own perspective by himself, and then I help him wherever I can with any suggestions or whatever thing. But it's also about accepting that you don't know everything, and then yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I feel stupid when I don't know anything, and I just tell him, let's search on Google, but this is what it is currently, and I cannot invent something that is not my knowledge. So yeah, I think it's part of the new generations.
That's really brilliant. I'd like to turn attention to the notes that the professor and the developer of this chart included, and I don't imagine you guys had a chance to look at them. So I'm going to make statements. I'm reading this thing, and then I'd like to throw it open for impromptu comments. Don't treat all employees the same way. It sounds obvious, doesn't it? What works for seniors isn't going to work for younger people. What motivates millennials will probably make boomers uneasy. Here's what he says to remember. Great leaders don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. Some people need daily feedback, but others prefer just a monthly check-in. Some want detailed plans, others crave the freedom to create, be left alone. Some people thrive in group discussions, but others hate that. They want to work alone. Leave me alone. Let me create. I need quiet. So you got to know people, individuals, and as a leader, and you need to cater to each type of personality. Doesn't have to be an age bracket. It's a personality. Ken, would you agree?
Yeah, yes and no. I don't like the idea of checking in with a person once a month. I think people at any job level appreciate more contact than that. Just whether it's touching base, providing some feedback, providing some recognition. But I think people, even if they do prefer to work more individualistically, appreciate having the contact and communication. And frankly, that's how managers learn about their employees and employees learn about their managers, and we build that relationship. But all along, the idea of understanding your employees as individuals is very important. But again, to avoid the stereotyping, when I hear saying, well, you can't do this with boomers, but you can do it with Gen X, see, that's stereotyping. And some boomers will operate in many respects similarly to what one would expect of a Gen X or a millennial. And sometimes you'll find millennials that seem more like a boomer. I think if we learn more about our employees as individuals, we go from there. So I wouldn't apply one managerial strategy to any particular age group. I want to understand my employees as individuals, help them learn, grow, collaborate with them to the extent that that works productively, and make sure that we are having open two-way communication and dialogue. We have a work environment. Look, there is more emphasis today on inclusivity, which is a positive, and that's far more with younger generations than it was with our boomer generation. That's great. That's a plus. And every generation at the workplace should be aware of that and recognize the importance of that kind of development, as with collaboration, as with focusing on people as individuals. So I do think the individual's approach is right. But I don't just take a whole blanket and say, all right, some people like to be contacted once a month. That's tougher for me to buy. That's just my opinion.
So it says here, leadership isn't about your style, talking about the leader. It's about adapting to your team's styles. Everything is built on individuality. Right?
Well, that's also a yes and no. Leadership is also situational. I may have an open and relaxed communicative style where we have a lot of joint decision making. At the same time, I'm now the captain of the Titanic and we just hit or got hit by an iceberg. I'm not going to say, okay, team, let's sit down and let's talk about what we're going to do and make sure everybody's feeling good. Sometimes situations, depending on the timing and the resources and other demands, will call for more firm, direct, and decisive leadership. We're not going to see the kind of two-way communication and employee involvement that we might see in others. So in addition to focusing on the individual, we have to look at the situational demands. Leadership is a variable. It changes, certainly in various situations, and to be aware of that as well. I can't always be a participative leader. There are times to be more firm, direct, and assertive, and that's not the overall leadership style, but there may be an emergency situation that calls for that.
He says the best teams are not built on equality, they're built on individuality. He says that's where the magic happens in a team. That's when everyone wins. Israel, what do you think of that?
Sorry, Ken froze up on me. Oh, excuse me. One moment. Yeah, Ken froze up on me. So
That's because I'm a boomer.
No, that's because there's 3 people on our Wi-Fi right now.
Sometimes, just to be mean, I'll be talking, and this is what I'll do.
That's funny.
That's
I'm sorry,
pretty
Israel,
good.
go ahead.
No worries. Yeah, so just to get on what Ken was talking about in regards to having sort of a very what's the word I'm looking for? In regards to leadership in emergency situations, the way I would say like I personally operate under such circumstances is clear direct authority stating what they want and how they like it. And then from there it sort of creates a bit of a pocket wherein you can create sort of how do I say, a collaborative space to, be diplomatic and discuss how it could be done. And it's one of those things of if you, I would say, again, this is, I would call it a symptom of my growing up in an intergenerational household, because my mom and uncles, Gen X, so they have that very clear, our authority is perfect. And then there's one uncle who has, a style of my authority is exactly this. However, I will give you some room to work in. And so when it comes to workplaces, I think that style of, leadership is a little more efficient. Clear, direct communication of what is wanted with some wiggle room to allow for collaboration, especially with, the one giving said direction.
I agree with this, and kind of to like go off of it, I think also that, I mean, although it is very ideal to, meet with people and do, have your own individual plan for every single employee, I feel like that at a certain point is not going to end up working, because then if you meet with one person once a week and one person every other day and one person every single day, then like the timeline gets kind of messed up. And I don't know if that's necessarily bettering communication or worsening it. I feel like that might become a little bit more clunky. So I think I agree with kind of meeting a little bit halfway, where there are some expectations, like maybe, okay, we meet every week, once a week, every week, or something like that. But also there is wiggle room, like maybe having, availability to meet more than once if something comes up. But I think, I think catering to people's individual needs is something that we should definitely think about and like have that in our mind as we go through with interactions in the workplace. But I think if we go fully, okay, every single person, I'm going to treat all of you differently, that's just not going to work in practice.
Christian?
There's what I really disagree with also is to make that an absolute, what you just read it, because to me there's a coaching aspect in there as well. So for instance, if and this goes back to the first question you asked me today, Ed, how did you manage this team? The team was across pretty much all the generations we have on this chart, 64 years old to 23 years old. And if I had thought about who prefers what, I would have driven myself insane, A, and B, nobody would have learned anything. So what I would typically do is I would mix it up. I would make it a priority to talk to the 23-year-olds. I couldn't do in person, but on a Zoom, one-on-one Zoom call, I would make it a priority to text the baby boomer. I would kind of do exactly the opposite of what's on the chart, because that way everybody becomes more fluent. I compare it to a language, becomes more fluent in every one of these four styles here, which at the end of the day, I think helps everyone. And then the second thing is you have to also make compromises, like Natalie just said. In many offices, even today, email, while being Gen X and therefore old, is still the main way to communicate, among other things, for legal reasons. It's easier to subpoena emails than it is to subpoena recordings of phone calls that may or may not exist, right?
Yeah.
So apply that with a barrel of salt. Yes and no is good, Ken. I like that. Exactly.
I'm speechless.
Again?
If it
Somebody's-
helps, I was sort of again a symptom of my upbringing. This is essentially like the rundown of communication that my uncle has driven into me. I believe I mentioned him last time I was here. My uncle works as a probation officer, so essentially an office space, and so he's always been essentially for lack of a better term, my drill sergeant about it. He has sort of a very heavy-handed approach. That's why I call him more of a drill sergeant than anything. But getting drilled in these forms of communication, I find is why, in regards like intergenerational communication, especially in my experience on like school projects and the like, I've proven relatively decent in that. And it's one of those things. If I do agree, there should be a use of all these forms of communication to begin to adjust someone, as times are changing, and sort of how Christian compared it to being a language. I think Natalie, I've told Natalie about this immersion. Essentially, go all in by essentially participating with something new and try to learn from there with the fundamentals.
We have a few minutes remaining. So, oh yes, Rigo, hello.
Yeah, I think also I don't know if it's a general agreement for all, but I think the word being the word empathy is being forgotten for new generations. And what I mean by that is that perhaps when I was starting my first jobs, I realized that I hate some kind of leadership, and I didn't like the way they managed the company, or I was expecting that the manager was super intelligent. Of course, twice intelligent than me. That was my expectation, but certainly that was my perspective because I never have been a leader before. So I was trying to teach him how to lead, but without experience. And currently, maybe new generations realize that they can suggest something when they never have been in their manager's shoes. It took me a while to understand that in terms that perhaps a leader is someone who perhaps is not the expert on the field, but he just need to focus on give direction and give instructions. And sometimes the instructions are not like adequate for all kind of audience because the new generations will expect a test message, and perhaps the baby boomers will expect something else. But at the end, the leader needs to be focused specifically on maybe just don't get sink as Ken was saying, the Titanic, you don't have time to sit and explain the situation. You just need to be a leader that, moves forward. So yeah, that's like my 2 cents as well.
2 pesos. Huh?
Yeah, 2 pesos, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So Israel, the last time we talked, or maybe it was the time before, you mentioned of a situation in the lunchroom about the food preparation or inavailability of foods. Is that still going on, or did that
It's
improve?
kind of a yes and no. It's sort of on stasis because the cafeteria has begun to improve the quality of their foods, and so we're sort of pumping the brakes a bit. We do acknowledge that the quality is still rather subpar, for lack of a better term, right now that comes to mind. And so due to just everyone's personal lives as well as professional lives sort of getting muddled within the past couple weeks and months, we've kind of have to put that on hold. Um, though it's one of those things of it is still on our list to do and address. Um, but for right now, we just kind of have to hold on. And it's just kind of one of those things of I like to call it happenstance. Sort of it's a weird, how do I say, mishmash of coincidence meets expectation meets eventuality of sorts.
I got a, technical question for you, Israel, because I'm a boomer and I need some help. So I don't know if you can see my screen on the bottom there. You see that number 1 on the bottom?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay. I can't get rid of that off the screen. I think it's because Microsoft is trying to get me to spend money and sign up, and they're invading my system here. And I keep trying to get it off my screen, and I can't figure out how to do it without signing up and spending new money. I'm on Chrome and Google, and I have enough.
Yeah.
Um, so how do I do I have to go into Microsoft and register? I forget all my passwords, all that means I have to do all that again, and I don't want to bother with it. So how do I just ignore it? Is it possible to escape the grasp of Microsoft?
To my knowledge, sort of going back to my previous statement of I'm somewhat of a Luddite. Theoretically, it's possible. Though I don't know, I have the technical language to really offer any major solutions without seeing it
Okay.
myself, sort of
All
deal.
right. All right. So I've become a member of the Geek Squad at Best Buy, so I'll bring it to I'll bring it to them. Thank
I
you.
think-
It'll
Ask
improve your
AI.
technical fluency.
Ask AI. Write a prompt in Copilot or whatever the Google equivalent is. I forgot about how to get rid of the number 1 on my screen in Zoom and see what comes up. Maybe something comes up you can use.
No, it's not in Zoom. It's on my my screen.
Oh, it's on your
Uh,
screen. Yeah, just write a prompt and see
yeah.
what comes up.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Also,
you get something useful and sometimes you don't.
I
Like
would
Ken
argue,
said.
I would
Sorry,
argue
Natalie.
as well, this directly goes to our point. Israel and I are humanities majors. We can tell you our opinion on some classic literature, but I do not think we necessarily know how to solve that tech issue.
Yeah, I'd have
Well,
to
now
be there to see it.
that's an intergenerational find. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. It'll improve your fluency, your technological fluency.
Well,
Some of Natalie's books are in the background right there.
Yes,
So
these are all my childhood books.
wow.
Awesome.
I don't have any that I
Oh,
remember.
Mhm.
You know what I have in storage is my old golf clubs, but also uh, about 100 LPs, you know, long play, 33, whatever. Um, and they sit there. And they must be worth a bunch of money now, but um, you know, I don't, they're just in storage,
get
I
which I
would
pay
enjoy a
yourself
for
copy of
every month.
Revolver.
a turntable like I have downstairs, because I have all my LPs. I brought them all over from Switzerland. Play them, rediscover that music. It's awesome. I can really recommend it. I haven't listened to this in 30 years, and then you put it on, and you're being transported back. It's really nice.
Interesting. Ken, do you remember those days?
Of course, I have a stack of those albums in the garage, some great ones, some classics, and I have no idea what to do with them. And Christian just had a pretty good suggestion. How about listening to some of them?
Yeah.
And I think that's a good idea.
yeah, just last week we put on a CD with the Bob Dylan Christmas album.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's a ritual in our house, the Bob Dylan Christmas album, which is an acquired taste.
No, I was born into this acquired taste.
Excuse me.
If you
Times
would
they
like,
are
I could,
changing.
if you would like, I could bring in some CDs I have from 2 Tuareg rock groups. The Tuareg, they're a nomadic people in northern Africa, and a lot of them have played what's called a Sahara Desert Blues. It's pretty interesting. I could bring in 2 CDs I have.
I want to tell you that I want you to do that. Okay. And that in the next edition of Generations, which will be after January 1 sometime, let's do that. Let's have that as part of the discussion. And if you don't mind, you know, playing it.
Oh, certainly. I would love to. I enjoy sharing music. Natalie, I think Natalie, have you been victim to me talking about Soviet era post-punk?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, I have this odd proclivity for just finding foreign language music and then just like, hey, I kind of like this. Um, like I had been doing a project on, I mentioned this I think last time too, an play Zoot Suit by Luis Valdez, and I ended up finding a song by Guerrero. I forget his Lalo Guerrero, El Chicano. That was pretty good. I would recommend that one too.
Rigo, let me ask you. Oh, go ahead, please. I got
I was
just an
just
off the
going
wall
to
question.
say, perhaps next time we do the discussion on generations, we can talk about some like leading pieces of media per different and focuses different generations, because I have some of that media sitting right behind me. I just thought about that.
I have a lot of older media at home as well. I especially like old movies. I was kind of harassing Natalie. I was like, "You want to go see Doctor Strangelove? It's a Stanley Kubrick movie."
I
Because I
remember.
had arranged it.
I
Yeah, I had
remember that.
arranged that with some friends.
Wow, that's great. So this is fascinating, frankly. Rigo, let me ask you a question. I'm changing this topic. How close are you to Polanco in Mexico City?
Well, in kilometers is like 50 kilometers away, which is like 1 hour and 20 minutes of traffic.
30 miles,
Okay.
thereabouts.
Miles,
So
I don't know miles,
the
but
public
yeah.
transportation doesn't work, right?
Not at all, because I live in the surroundings where, yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, okay. Well, that is the location of the last in-person meeting I produced in Mexico City, and that was about 10 years ago, maybe 8. And we were hosted, which is a really upscale area, and we were hosted by the Big Four accounting company, Ernst & Young, and that's their Mexican headquarters there. So Mexico City is on my list of meetings in person. Now, each in-person meeting will have a Zoom component, of course. If not the whole thing, then parts of it. For the purposes of not only recording the work that we do, but giving voice, giving audience, huge audience potentially, to the speakers, the topics, and the sponsors. So I thank you all for being on this special edition of Generations, and welcome you back, of course. I've learned so much from doing this, and the ability to communicate not only across time and space, but across generations. And if this show can help others out there in the audience do that better, then we all win from that. So I'd like everybody to do something here as we come to a close. Wish you all a Merry Christmas and happy, healthy New Year. Let's go to you, Christian, first.
Well, I can only really thank you, Ed in particular, and all of you on right now for this amazing journey that I've had from the end of May onwards, 53 shows. It's taught me so much. I can't even begin to describe what it's taught me. But I think the most important thing is my public speaking comfort level went way, way up. And that is a huge skill. And I'm really, really grateful to you, Ed, for kind of bringing this out in me.
That's a pleasure. Ken?
Yeah, well, certainly to wish all of you happy, healthy, and peaceful holidays and New Year's, prosperous as well. I think that what's a very important underlying theme of today's topic, and frankly, the programs that Ed produces, is the whole relevance of learning and continuing our own self-development and growth and expanding our knowledge base, reading, going to podcasts, webinars, seminars, associations. It's just so important to read, not just staying current, reading some of the classics, expanding our understanding of different cultures. If we really want to stay relevant at any age, we have to continue our learning. And as we get older, it's even more important. It's very easy to get into a cocoon. This is how we used to do it. And when you hear yourself thinking that, it's time to set it aside and say, look, the world is changing, and we can do one of two things. We can either continue our learning and growth and development and be relevant, or we can become obsolete. And there's the expression, and we talked about marketing myopia, and I had a client who said, I don't want to be the last buggy whip maker in town. and, I make the best buggy whips in the world. They're just great. No more buggies, pal. That's what'll happen. We have to continue our learning. And frankly, that's what Ed does here. He helps all of us continue our learning and growth, and you do it in an entertaining way, which makes learning all that much more pleasant and comfortable for all of us. So thank you, and thanks all of you. It's great hearing all of your comments today. And I will just say, as usual, all of you are terrific.
Thank you. Thank you. Natalie.
Well, I think that one of the biggest issues that people have is miscommunication. And so I'm a big advocate for people communicating and listening. And by doing that, learning and growing and just having a better understanding of each other. And so by having this platform where we can communicate and we listen and we go off of people's ideas, that is bettering not only our own communication, but hopefully others' communications. By listening to these new ideas and these other perspectives, perhaps they can start to see the world a little bit differently and to understand people. And I think that that is such a valuable skill to have. And so this is a really wonderful platform to do that. And also, I just think that this is a wonderful place for people to feel heard, coming in, bringing your own experiences, bringing your own opinions, and no one's right or wrong. We're just talking about it. And I think that that's just a wonderful thing to have as well.
Rico?
I was searching the clubs button to say, and I get messed. No, thank you, Ed, for the chance to have this platform. It has been a year. I don't remember exactly the number of shows we had, but certainly we have enjoyed all of them. I think this last one is not exception. I truly enjoy. I think personally what I get about this is just the fact that every time that I connect, I learn something new. And certainly you help a lot in also sharing your experience and enhance the way we communicate. So thank you so much for that. And thank you, all of you. I think we are missing Steve also. He has been in many shows, but thank you for sharing your knowledge. And I think like understand it that by sharing, we were all together. So I appreciate
Thank
that.
you. Israel, once again, thank you for being involved in this. You add depth and scope. And,
I try. Yeah. No, I just want to thank you as well, for just the opportunity, because I always view these as networking opportunities.
Right.
As well as just, an opportunity to share ideas. The platform is very valuable to me.
Yeah. So let's I want you to send me a message. I don't care how you do it. Smoke signal or what. But what
Messenger
date?
pigeon.
What date in the new year? It could be January 1. I don't care. Just pick a date. And we'll set it up. I'll set it up. And if you can think of another person, if each of you can think of one other person that might, from a generation, the varying generations, let's just grow. I don't want it to be really big. I just want it to be really good each time. And and we can add, I'll try to find one other person too. We'll see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody be well.
Have a Merry Christmas. Feliz Navidad, Rico.
Gracias. Thank you.
Yeah,
Holidays.
right. Feliz Navidad. I remember that song from who? Trini's, I don't
Jose
know.
Feliciano.
Oh, Feliciano, that's right. Ciao.
Ciao tutti.